4, 3, 2, 1.
Studio Classroom is recording.
Studio Classroom. Studio Classroom.
Please stand by.
Studio Classroom is on the air.
Hello and welcome to Studio Classroom on the air. We're so glad you could join us today. My name is Anne-Marie and I think today is a great day to learn something new.
It certainly is, so let's do that together, friends. My name is Gabe. Anne-Marie, what do you think about smoking?
What do I think about smoking?
Yep.
Well, you know, smoking, I really remember growing up in the States, a lot of people did it in restaurants, but at some point it was outlawed in the States. It used to be some people could sit in a smoking section and some people could sit in a non-smoking section, but now nobody can smoke in restaurants in the States. It's not allowed.
Yeah, it's true. Actually, the laws kind of changed here in Taiwan as well several years ago. It used to be legal to smoke indoors, and now it's illegal for the most part, right? And growing up, I always heard that smoking was bad for your health, and I think that's something that most people have heard. That wasn't always the case. Maybe a long time ago, decades ago, there were a lot of cigarette commercials and things like that that seemed to encourage smoking. But society has changed its view on this over time. After smoking cigarettes, or after cigarettes, came into existence, and people realized that it was bad for their health, actually something else came into existence, and that is vaping, right?
And a lot of people ask the same questions about vaping as well. Is vaping healthy or not healthy? And our lesson today is called To Vape or Not to Vape. We are going to find out as we read our article. So let's get into our first reading of the day.
Don't vape.
To vape or not to vape? Vaping is anything but harmless. Anyone who has paid attention to the news over the past 5 decades knows that smoking cigarettes is bad for one's health. No one should inhale smoke or toxic chemicals which can cause cancer. Some who smoke have turned to e-cigarettes to get their nicotine fix or to try to stop smoking. However, according to the World Health Organization, WHO, there is little documentation that e-cigarettes are effective as a quit smoking aid. Nicotine is addictive, especially for adolescents. Because of the effect nicotine has on the developing brain, becoming addicted as teens makes them more likely to continue to use nicotine as adults.
Hi everyone, welcome to Language Lab. I'm Jack. 我们先来看 inhale 这个动词，意思是吸气或吸入。譬如 Monica inhaled a lot of smoke from the burning building, so she had to be taken to the hospital. Monica 从燃烧的建筑物里吸入了大量的烟雾，所以不得不被送往医院。或者是 Cover your mouth and don't inhale the gas that is in the air because it is bad for your health. 把嘴巴捂住，不要吸入空气中的气体，因为有害健康。Inhale 还有狼吞虎咽的意思，譬如 The boys inhaled their lunch because they wanted to go outside and play. 男孩们狼吞虎咽的吃午餐，因为他们想出去玩。接着来看 documentation 这个名词，意思是文件、记载或是证明文件。譬如 Is there any documentation about the effect of cigarette smoke on small children? 有任何资料证明香烟的烟雾对小孩会造成影响吗？或者是 Make sure the documentation for the cost of the seminar is accurate. 请确认这个研讨会费用的证明文件都准确无误。再举个例句 ：All the documentation regarding Myra's health and treatment is in this file。跟 Myra 有关的所有健康和治疗文件都在这个档案中。Okay, let's get back to our teachers.
Thank you so much, Jack. All right, let's get into our lesson and discuss this question, to vape or not to vape. Right away, we see vaping is anything but harmless. So I get the idea that some of us have the idea in our minds that vaping isn't a big deal, it doesn't cause problems, or it's harmless, but actually our writer feels that vaping is anything but.
Let's talk about that phrase, anything but, and then an adjective. This is a much more interesting way to express that something is actually that adjective, okay? Is actually the opposite of that adjective. So it's not harmless, it's anything but harmless, okay? We could say that vaping is harmful. That's okay, but it's much more interesting to say vaping is anything but harmless. So don't go imagining that it's harmless.
That's right. Well, we continue reading here. Anyone who has paid attention to the news over the past 5 decades knows that smoking cigarettes is bad for one's health. Okay, let's talk about that phrase, to pay attention to something.
Attention is like time. You know, people say that we only have a certain amount of time every day. Everybody has the same amount of time, that is 24 hours every day, however many minutes and seconds that is. Well, the same is true for our attention, and that's something that we don't think about that often. What am I paying attention to? There are so many things that want my attention in life, like social media and anything, right? Anything that wants my attention, I have to think, well, how is it trying to get my attention? And should I pay my attention to this thing? How much time should I give to this thing, right? How much attention should I give it? I think this is a very important question for all of us to think about. What are we paying attention to with our lives?
That is a great point, Gabe. Okay, well, we are reading here that if you've paid attention to the news, then you know that smoking cigarettes is bad for you. No one should inhale smoke or toxic chemicals which can cause cancer. Okay, before we move on, I have to mention that we actually have a special word in English for toxic chemicals which can cause cancer, a carcinogen.
Ooh, that's right, carcinogen. This is anything that can cause cancer or lead to cancer or maybe contribute to cancer, right? And studies have been done on a lot of different things that show that those things might lead to cancer. They may be carcinogens.
That's right. Some people who smoke have turned to e-cigarettes to get their nicotine fix or to try to stop smoking. However, the WHO says that there's little documentation to show that e-cigarettes are effective to quit smoking. You know, people I have known in the past who quit smoking often quit cold turkey.
Ooh, that's a good phrase for you to know, friends. If you quit cold turkey, that means you try to quit immediately and very suddenly. It's the opposite of what a lot of people try to do. They try to eventually or gradually quit. Maybe they smoke fewer packets today than they did yesterday, but over time they will quit. But if you quit cold turkey, you're trying to do it right away. Well, we did see something else in that previous sentence, and that is to get a nicotine fix. We use this phrase, to get a fix of some kind, when talking about going to a drug that you feel like you need. You feel like you're getting your fix.
That's right. All right, well, we have more to learn when it comes to vaping here in a moment, but right now, let's go to today's Info Cloud. Welcome to Info Cloud, everyone.
Hey, Andrea, sorry I'm late.
Oh, it's no big deal. Don't worry about it.
Thanks. And thanks for not making a big deal of me being late.
Well, being a few minutes late is really no big deal. If something is a big deal, it's very important.
So, if you make a big deal of something, you take something that is less important and draw more attention to it.
Yes, now this could describe a person who is a little too proud.
Johnny seems to think he's a big deal.
Now, this implies that others don't share the opinion.
Or maybe someone who is famous in a specific area.
You can say Cole is a pretty big deal in the skateboarding world.
So, other skateboarders would know about Cole, but people who aren't interested in the sport wouldn't.
That's right. But let's go back to no big deal. That means something isn't a problem.
For example, everyone was worried about the typhoon, but it turned out to be no big deal.
Now, this can be used to reassure someone about a small mistake they made. You can say it's not a big deal at all. This is especially true about learning English. It's not a big deal, or it's no big deal if you make a few mistakes along the way.
当有朋友为了一件没什么大不了的事情跟你道歉，你可以告诉他 "It's no big deal." 在这里 ，deal 有商业交易的含义。当你说 "It's no big deal" 的时候，那就代表这件事情没有那么重要，不是那么严重。这是一句安慰人的话，要对方不用担心。另外，当有人把一件不重要的事情看得很严重，那就可以用 make a big deal 来形容。你可以说 "Don't make a big deal out of it." 不要把这件事情看得那么严重。Big deal 也可以用来形容一个很骄傲的人。例如 ，Johnny thinks he's a big deal。Johnny 觉得自己很厉害，或者是他觉得自己是一个很重要的人。这就是今天的 Info Cloud， 我们下次云端见。
Studio Classroom is on the air.
Welcome back to Studio Classroom. Were you paying attention earlier, friends? We talked about something that I want to quiz you over. The idea of quitting immediately, not slowly over time. We call that quitting cold. Here are your options. Quitting cold what? A, chicken. B, turkey. C, eagle. Or D, alpaca. Quitting cold what? Alpaca.
Alpaca, that one seems to stand out from all the other ones. I do know it's some type of bird.
Yes.
I think it's cold turkey, right?
You're right, it is. Friends, do you remember that? Yes. Have you ever had to quit cold turkey, or have you quit cold turkey? It's not an easy thing to do, but it is a way to quit something, right? Well, let's continue learning about our lesson, to vape or not to vape.
To vape or not to vape? The chemical also makes it harder for teens to control their impulses, concentrate, and learn. In addition, teens who vape face twice the risk of smoking regular cigarettes in the future. Adolescents are enticed to use vaping devices because the marketing and flavorings make it appear to be cool. Teens think that vaping isn't as harmful as smoking because they're just inhaling water vapor with flavor. Research shows, however, that there are a lot of ingredients, such as formaldehyde, in vaping liquids or e-juices that harm the human body.
"好的，接下来来看 impulse 这个名词，意思是冲动。譬如 Maya and Ruby never sit beside each other in class because their impulse to laugh at things is so strong. Maya 和 Ruby 在课堂上从来不坐在一起，因为他们很容易就会笑出声音来。或者是 When people see a bear, their first impulse is usually to run. 当人看到熊的时候，第一个反应通常都是跑走。再举个例句 My wife tries never to go into plant stores because she buys so many plants on impulse. 我太太尽量不去园艺店，因为她会心血来潮买好多植物。最后来看 vapor 这个名词，意思是蒸汽或者是雾气。譬如 When it starts turning cold, the water fountain has vapors of water around it. 天气开始变冷时，喷泉周围就会出现水蒸气。或者是 The vapor from her perfume filled the room when Marilyn walked in. 当 Marilyn 走进来的时候，她身上的香水味充满了整个房间。Vapor 当动词的时候呢，是 vaporize， 意思就是蒸发。譬如 The village at the bottom of the volcano was vaporized by the hot lava from the eruption. 位于火山山脚下的村庄被喷出来的炙热熔岩给气化了。All right, let's get back to our teachers.
Okay, thanks, Jack. Well, before the break, we were starting to talk about nicotine and how some people get a nicotine fix. And we are talking more about nicotine here. We found out that it is addictive. And now we're going to learn some more about it as well. We read the chemical also makes it harder for teens to control their impulses, concentrate, and learn. So I get the idea here that if you are young, then if you're putting nicotine into your body, it's actually going to cause you to not do as well in school.
Yeah, that's one of the consequences, right? It makes you concentrate less and maybe could cause some difficulty in learning and being in a situation or environment like at school. And of course, you want to learn new things, right? You want to be able to focus and to pay attention and enjoy that process and that aspect of life. So don't let something like nicotine get in the way, okay? We read here, in addition, teens who vape face twice the risk of smoking regular cigarettes in the future. That's a pretty big statistic right there. I think that's pretty serious. Twice the risk of smoking actual cigarettes in the future.
Yeah, so I get the idea that although you might start vaping and vaping isn't as harmful as normal cigarettes, you're not going to be satisfied with just vaping for long. Eventually, the risk is pretty high that you will turn to regular cigarettes.
Yeah, I wonder why that is. I think it's probably because of the actions involved in both, right? You're putting up something to your mouth just in the same way you would do with a regular cigarette. And so it's easy to go from doing that action to just replacing the object. Yeah.
I think too that with cigarettes there is more nicotine in them, so you can get a larger hit of that drug, and that's kind of what happens with other types of drugs too. You might start out with drugs that you think are not as harmful, but as time goes on, you have to turn to harder and harder drugs to get the same feeling that you did from those easier drugs to
And
take.
that's why it's such an important thing not to even begin vaping or smoking. I might say this a lot for this lesson, but just don't even begin. If you haven't begun yet, okay, just don't even start doing it. I think sometimes, you know, there's an association involved, right?
Oh, what do you mean by that?
Like you see your friends, they've got something in their hands, right? They're doing something with their hands. And I think it's natural for us to just want to do something with our hands. Like maybe you might, you know, twirl your pen around, or you might
I feel like that when people are on their phones.
You might, yeah, you always have your phone in your hand, right? And it's something you're doing with your hands. If you want something to do with your hands while your friends are smoking or vaping, go for something that's less addictive, okay? Go out and get a bag of chips or a 养乐多 or a drink like that, right? Of course, if you have a lot of those things, it's not healthy, but it's not as addicting, right? And you're still doing something with your hands.
That's a really good point. Well, why would someone want to start vaping in the first place? Let's find out here. Adolescents are enticed to use vaping devices because the marketing and flavorings make it appear to be cool. Okay, so here is reason number one why someone might want to start vaping. It's because it looks cool.
Yeah, and that's a understandable reason to start a lot of things, right? We do things because our friends are doing them and we think our friends are cool, or what they're doing kind of looks cool as well. We read here, teens think that vaping isn't as harmful as smoking because they're just inhaling water vapor with flavor. Now there's a related word that you could know, and that is the word exhale. When you're breathing in, you're inhaling, and when you're breathing out, you're exhaling.
That's right. Well, it says here, though, that that's really not all you're inhaling. Research shows, however, that there are a lot of ingredients, such as formaldehyde in vaping liquids or e-juices, that harm the human body. Now, this is something to remember not just for vaping, but for anything you put in your body, whether it's a medication, whether it's food. You really have to look at what the ingredients are of that thing before you choose to take it into your body.
It's true. And as I said before, some things are more addicting than others, right? And nicotine is kind of an addictive substance, which is what makes smoking and vaping so dangerous. Something else that has a wonderful flavor, though, and is not as addicting, but you still have to be careful how much you have it, is cinnamon rolls.
I love cinnamon rolls.
I don't know if there are cinnamon roll flavored vapes or e-cigarettes. Don't try it if there are. But let's enjoy this conversation about cinnamon rolls. Why not?
Cinnamon rolls have become very popular here lately.
Yes, it seems like every other bakery is making cinnamon rolls now. This was not the case when I moved to Taipei 5 years ago.
Do you like cinnamon rolls?
Yes, I love cinnamon rolls.
Do the cinnamon rolls you find here taste the same as those in the US?
No, there are some major differences. First, cinnamon rolls in the US are much sweeter. There is a thick coat of icing that covers the rolls.
That's too sweet for locals here. Are there other differences in the rolls you find here?
The cinnamon flavor is much stronger in American cinnamon rolls, as American bakeries put much more cinnamon in the rolls than bakeries here do.
Interesting. I want to try an American cinnamon roll someday. Cinnamon roll. Cinnamon roll. Icing. Icing.
Flavor. Flavor. As we finish up the first day of our lesson about vaping, the title has really caught my eye because I feel like I have heard this phrase before somewhere else, to vape or not to vape. Is that from Shakespeare?
Hey, that is a good question, and it is from Shakespeare, right? Well, not to vape or not to vape, but to be or not to be. Do you know which Shakespearean character said this?
I think I do because we've talked about it before. Is it Hamlet?
It is Hamlet. It's probably the most famous soliloquy that is something that the actor says, you know, on stage by himself or herself in all of Shakespeare's plays, to be or not to be. And actually, it's a good thing that we talk about this now, even as we talk about vaping, right? Because we all know that vaping is kind of related to smoking. Smoking is the leading preventable cause of death around the world, right? And so when we ask the question to be or not to be, or when Hamlet was asking that question, he was actually asking to live or not to live because he was contemplating or thinking about suicide.
You know, I have noticed that a lot of people who use substances to cope with things that they're going through in their life, they do sometimes have deeper things going on in their lives that they really need to deal with, but maybe they use smoking or drinking or drugs as a coping mechanism.
Right, coping mechanisms, that's right. What is a coping mechanism that you have? A lot of people have different ways to cope with difficult things in life, right? But we just want to remind you that God really does love you. If you have made it this far in life, it's because God wants you here and He has a purpose for you. We all have thoughts that are sometimes depressing. Some people have suicidal thoughts. We just want to acknowledge that. But just remember, God has you here for a purpose. All right? It's okay, it's natural for us to ask the question to be or not to be, and to, you know, have different coping mechanisms, maybe like vaping or smoking, to help in life, right? But we're all trying to improve. And we do have more to learn about vaping. We know that the government is, of course, against it, and we do not encourage it as well. But we acknowledge that it might be a coping mechanism that you have right now.
Well, we will see you tomorrow as we get into the second half of our lesson. We hope you'll join us right here on Studio Classroom.
Lifetime. I am so proud to have you in my life. A good friend lasts a lifetime.